Wir wollen eine Runde mit Ayrton Senna fahren auf diesem Betonschlauch von Phoenix.
Ja, die Strecke ist typisch amerikanisch für amerikanische Städte, nämlich lauter 90-Grad-Kurven, lange Gerade und keinen Namen.
But here we are coming up to the start-finish line. At this point, Senna's McLaren is doing 186 miles an hour. Then it's hard on the brakes and straight down into second gear for, in fact, Senna's corner. It's called the curve to Senna. Then into this curve to Sol, this long left-hand corner, third, fourth, fifth gear now. All the way to 13,500 revs into sixth gear. This is the second quickest part of the track, and again about 186 miles an hour into fourth gear. This very difficult corner with a lake on the outside, back up into fifth, into sixth gear now. Then on the brakes into fourth for this double right-hand corner. You listen, well off the throttle, just touching the throttle, then hard on the brakes into second gear for the first of these two very tight right-hand corners, holding second around the left, then picking up third instantly, then back on the brakes into second gear. These are very slow, a lot of push in the car, understeer. Second, third, short, shifting third into fourth, and holding fourth up until the final left-hand corner, back into third, then hard on the throttle, third, fourth, fifth, and finally into sixth gear, passing those two cars, gathering speed again, all the way up to 185, 6 miles an hour, crossing the line now.
As you can see, this is a very challenging. Closes up on Senna. Very fast part of the racetrack right here. No passing opportunities. Now you're on board with Senna. Let's see if it's any more bouncy than the Ferrari.
It certainly looks as if it is, doesn't it? There's no doubt about it that the last 2 years the Ferraris have been absolutely excellent on high-speed, bumpy types of tracks, and the McLarens haven't been so good. This year the McLarens seem to have got a grip of their problem and have come back into their own, obviously, with 4 wins out of 4 starts. But nevertheless, the Ferrari are making a comeback, whether it's just coincidental with their new trio at the top of the tree there, or whether it is really because they've got a grip on things, we don't know. Time will tell, of course, as the season progresses. Hard to believe that the committee can run a race team as well as a proper manager.
This is about the first time this year we've seen the two reigning superstars of Formula One, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost, able to race one another. It has been all Senna thus far this year. He usually just checks out and disappears. But right now, it looks like he's having to drive as hard as he can just to hold off the fourth place Ferrari of Alain Prost. This is the third on the racetrack. Up front, it's Nigel Mansell by nearly 4 seconds now over teammate Ricardo Patrese. This battle going on about 2 seconds behind Patrese.
Yeah, Nigel's got a handy 5-second lead over this group now, a 6-second lead over this group. So he is driving extremely well.
They are nose to tail. A pass attempt might not be too far away as the Ferrari closes in on the McLaren. Fast part of the racetrack, up through the gearboxes. Nothing but all horsepower and courage at this part of the racetrack. There you got to look at Ricardo Patrese. Prost takes a look up the straightaway, but it won't be this time.
When you see them swerving there, it wasn't really to break the draft. They're swerving around that bump that John was talking about earlier on. There is one bad bump on that back straight.
Das ist bereits 1,7 Sekunden unter dem Rundenrekord, den letztes Jahr Thierry Boutsen im Williams aufgestellt hat. 1,43,9 für Mansell. Und hier sind wir zu Gast im McLaren von Senna. Und das Klassement, Alesi, 0,6 Sekunden vor Mansell. Dann die Dreiergruppe, die wir immer sehen. Senna hier, hinter sich Prost und Patrese. Und dann mit 25 Sekunden Rückstand auf den Leader Gerhard Berger. Noch weiter hinten Andrea De Cesaris, Achter Capelli, der sich wacker hält in seinem Ersatzauto trotz Magenverstimmung und eben jetzt an den Boxen war. Wir sehen ihn gerade wieder vorbeifahren, also dieser 8. Platz dürfte bereits viel der Vergangenheit angehören, aber immerhin eine beachtliche Leistung für Ivan Capelli. 9. Piquet, 10. Moreno, 11. Gassot, 12. Gugelmin, 13. Boutsen, 14. Brandl, dann Pirro und Modena. Das sind die ersten 16. Da gab es ein großes Rätselraten im Tyrrell.
Most jön a bemelegítőköre, és utána a gyorsköre. Senna itt kapcsolgat. Itt az egyenes, és elment. Jól van, sikerült elmennie. Pont Berger volt az, akit megelőzött. rámegy a kerékvetőre. Ez azt jelenti, hogy eléggé igyekszik, mert a legszélsőbb pontokig húzza az autót, ereszti el addig, amíg lehet. Sennáról mondják egyébként azt, hogy ő az a pilóta a pályaversenyzés történetében, aki a legdrasztikusabban, a legbrutálisabban tud bemenni kanyarba, aki szinte nem lassít, hanem gyorsít a kanyarba való bemeneteknél, és hogyha már gyorsít, akkor kifele is miért ne gyorsítson. Tehát nagyon nagy erővel, inkább vissza, alacsonyabb sebességi fokozatokkal támadja a kanyart. A szakemberek pontosan ezt a szót használják vele kapcsolatban, hogy támadja a kanyarokat. Itt korrigál, picit korrigál, kijön az ívre, visszajön, itt van az íven, megint fantasztikusnak ígérkezik, kérem szépen az idő. 1.16.649 helyett 1.16.147. Nem igaz. 1.16.147.
Patrese is outstandingly good start, that he is not bogged down with the traffic for the time being, but the Williams is showing their tremendous superiority.
And while we ride with Ayrton Senna, hats off to Michael Schumacher, who is in 5th position in the Benetton Ford, because this is the young German. He's only 23 years old. It's only his 7th Grand Prix, and the only people who are ahead of him at the moment are Jean Alesi in the Ferrari, Ayrton Senna that we're with now, Riccardo Patrese, who is second, and Nigel Mansell leading. And the dominance, the superiority of the Williams here in Kyalami is quite incredible. Because even though Senna is in, as James has said, last year's car, so for that matter are Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese, with the notable exception of the fact that they have the new active suspension, which has no conventional metal springs. Instead it has high pressure hydraulics, and it really works here at Kyalami. Williams enthusiasts shouldn't get too excited though for the rest of the season, because actually Kyalami is very different from any other circuits. It is in fact the Grand Prix slowest circuit. It's slower than Monaco on a lap speed basis. The highest speed that the drivers reach here is about 150 miles an hour. They reach that 5 times on the circuit. And as I've said earlier on, the problem here is going to be stamina and reliability. And Ayrton Senna that we're with now said to me yesterday, we can't live with the Williams here. I know that. I'm just going to have to rely on reliability and driving for points. 10 points for a win, 6 points for second place, 4 points for third position, and so on, down to 1 point for sixth place.
Yes, and at the moment Senna is fighting to stay in front of that group that we're looking at in the inset there. He is struggling to stay in front of them, and the Williamses are clearly gone, and nobody else is a match for pace for the two Williamses here. Senna has just got himself a little bit of a breathing space, and Johnny Herbert is up to 8th place, and Herbert has really had a marvellous meeting so far. He's qualified really quite brilliantly in 11th place in a very, very old Lotus indeed, really fundamentally a 1989 car. It has none of the latest aerodynamics on it at all. They've done a little bit of work on it.
We saw Nigel Mansell nearly spin again. I think he's overdriving. He just wants too much from that car at this moment in time.
Yes, on his only really timed lap out of the 4 that he's so far attempted, he did a 1:17.294, which is just under a second off the time from Friday afternoon. And the only reason I think Mansell might be getting into trouble is that he might have a set of tyres that is not maybe as consistent. Sometimes does happen, you get a set of tyres that for some reason doesn't provide the balance and grip that all the others that you've had. Other than that, it can only be put down to overdriving. And certainly we've seen Mansell in the Saturday afternoon session here in Mexico make more mistakes than we've seen him make since the start of the Grand Prix season in South Africa.
Ayrton Senna halfway through his lap was 1.8 seconds slower at that point than Nigel Mansell was yesterday, but that should be heading for a little improvement again for the world champion, who's still in that 8th place on the grid behind Andrea de Cesaris, and there it is, a 19.2, which is a slight improvement. He's moved up to 6th place. That means that Jean Alesi now down to 7th, but Nigel Mansell still on pole position. The Mansell
Absolute command. This is on board with Ayrton Senna around the Melbourne hairpin, booting it away in second gear, traction control missing away as the car accelerates. Down to Goddard's corner, and in no hurry at all. 25 seconds, 1 minute 25 seconds to David Hill that was. That's not that much probably now because of his pit stop. That gap was taken just before he stopped, and now he's had a slow lap.
A full lap ahead of Alain Prost, is behind him. Now let's ride with the 3 times world champion through the old hairpin. That's the Starkey Bridge on his left, 6th gear, 170 miles an hour, even on this semi-damp surface here. Down to 3rd gear for the right-hander at McLean's with the stands in front of him. Climbing up towards Coppice in 5th gear, 155 miles an hour here. Round Coppice, which has a blind entry. You have to line up the car perfectly. Down the Starkey Straight under the bridge. This is 180 miles an hour, fastest part of the course. Hard on the brakes for the S's, 2nd gear, and that is about 55 miles an hour. Now the speed builds up, 3rd gear, 4th gear, 5th gear, 165 miles an hour. Over the crest, hard on the brakes again, down into 2nd gear, 35 miles an hour. You saw the tyres almost stop there, and there's the entry. We've got a bit of a problem with pictures because of the helicopter's visibility problems up there, and you see that Ayrton Senna's lead over Damon Hill, which was 1 minute 32 seconds at its most extreme, has now come down to 68 seconds. No problem for Senna. He's on lap 69 out of 76, and really just has to keep that McLaren going for quite a astounding. With Ayrton Senna. I mentioned that he has a contract, and nobody knew it before we got here. Our James Allen caught up with Senna before the weekend began and asked him if there was a chance that he would not finish the season.
That possibility exists up until 2 days ago, but when we finally then managed to put together the deal that we agreed verbally early in the year with the team, finally on paper, to secure the remaining of the season, the rest of the season, that's no longer a possibility. I believe now we are all on the same frame of mind, and it's our intention as a team to do our very best all the way to the end.
So we will have Ayrton Senna, the 3-time world champion, in the McLaren Ford the rest of the year. Let's sit on board now and listen to the 3-time world champ at work.
That was the Jordan who moved over, and look, he waves. He says thank you. That's Brundle right ahead of him. Big correction.
And that is for position. Brundle's 3rd, Senna's 4th.
They drag with them 100 weight or so of gravel chips, ranging from very fine to very coarse, as we have here in Estoril.
Ayrton Senna has got to beat 1:12.443 to improve on his grid position. The first time in a very long time. He is not only challenged, but for the moment also beaten by his teammate.
I think it's no bad thing when such a dominant man as Ayrton Senna does get a bit of a squeeze from a teammate, and I know the pain of yelling to get by another car. especially Herbert, could well be on his second set of tyres then, John, because he's on his 10th lap out of 12. And I'm certainly surprised that Senna pursues Herbert like this, because there's a car ahead of Herbert as well, and sometimes it's easier just to back out of it. And he's looking. Now that's typical of Ayrton Senna. What he does is he pulls over to the side to make sure that the car ahead of him sees clearly. Now Johnny's been intimidated there, and he's responded to the intimidation. It's a tactic Senna has used successfully. He knows that he wants to not make a mistake. He doesn't want to do something that would endanger the team or put himself into not getting the maximum time out of the car. Well, this is somebody who we should see a little bit of.
In the second Ligier, Derek Warwick is 12th in the second footwork, and Ayrton Senna, that we are riding with, is now on his 43rd lap, coming up to the right-hander at Flinders Bend, past the packed house veranda into the left-hander at East Terrace Bend, round the right-hander again at Flinders into East Terrace, underneath the bridge into the left-hander at Market's Turn. There's the Markets in front, which are being redeveloped with the old facade. Stag Turn, the right-hander, leads into Jones Straight, and this is 150 miles an hour to Brewery Bend. Slow down to about 95, up into 6th gear, build up to about 300k, and that's about 180 miles an hour. Hard on the brakes again from 6th to 2nd for racetrack hairpin. Senna leads. And all the corporate hospitality boxes on the left, having a good time. The only pity is that the sun is not shining as much as we've seen in Australia in the past, but on the other hand, it's just wet.
Well, exactly, mate. I was just about to say, but hang on, at least it's not raining.
It was a very quick lap from Ayrton back then, wasn't he? His last pole position here in Brazil.
Yes, blistering lap, and of course he actually out-qualified me by a second and a half, which is a bit of a shameful thing to admit, but he was Ayrton Senna and he was on home turf, and his car was very, very difficult to drive. You can see he's, the picture is shaky, but that's usually the camera, very bumpy circuit.
Well, that's it. You know, the camera angle is obviously to the side, but you could still see his hands, just how hard his hands are having to work, and his head is bobbing around.
A lot of kickback on the steering, you can see it juddering around, and so it was a fight. We hadn't quite got the setup right, but I mean, Ayrton managed to wring time out of any car he got his hands on, and I have to say it was more of a battle for me. I didn't get a good qualifying, and I had to face up to the fact that I'd just been out-qualified by that margin, massive margin, by Ayrton Senna.
Did you get out of the car at the end of qualifying, look at the data from this lap and just go, wow, I can't do it?
No, I never actually thought that I couldn't get close. I mean, I don't know why I qualified a second and a half. There must have been some sort of problem. Maybe I'd left the handbrake on or something. I don't know. It was a bit of a.
セナはベルガーを先行させ、2番手でマンセルを抑える。 シーズンの体制は決していた。 マンセルが初タイトルに王手をかけ、セナにはなす術がなかった。セナは3番グリッドからスタート。チャンピオンへのプレッシャーからか、いつものキレがないマンセルをスタートでかわし、パトレーゼに続き2番手で1コーナーに飛び込んだ。39周目にパトレーゼがスピン。セナトップに立つ。92年シーズン、セナやっと2勝目。マンセルは2位でフィニッシュ。念願のモナコグランプリ3番手からスタートしたセナ。なんとかヒルを抑え込み、プロストとシューマッハを追う。セカンドローからスタートしたセナはプロストを抑えトップに立つ。
much more than fourth gear.
Well, riding with Ayrton Senna at the moment. Running that brand new FW16 Williams with the Renault engine. And John, when we had a look at the rear suspension of the car in Brazil, I think it's a very interesting rear suspension, to say the least.
Well, Williams have taken advantage of rules, and they've incorporated an aerodynamic sheath over the top rear wishbones, and caused a few raised eyebrows as people thought that then constituted a movable aerodynamic device, but it was passed by the FIA scrutineer, and not much more has been heard on it. But just looking in with Senna here, how much work a driver is having to do. Now, this is a long Grand Prix, 83 laps, a high work rate. The only salvation for a driver is that in relative terms the grip level of the circuit is comparable, say, to Manicourt, which is not considered a particularly high grip circuit, but massive amount of work in the cockpit, hands, arms, upper body, a real aerobic exercise.
Ayrton Senna, his first flying lap.
Senna starts a qualifying lap, pushing to the limits.
Over the line with pole position holder Ayrton Senna into and out of the S's. Watch the line as he goes into Wakefield turn. And watch his right hand, because by doing so you will see what an advantage the Williams drivers with their semi-automatic gearboxes have got. They can keep their hands on the steering wheel all the time. And here at Adelaide, it's very hard work. This race is going to last, getting on for 2 hours for the many, many laps that they have to cover. And you multiply the number of laps by the number of gear changes, and it's very hard work for the driver. Less hard work if you're in a semi-automatic gearbox car, provided the semi-automatic gearbox keeps working properly, which has been the Achilles heel of the Williams Renault this year. Gerhard Berger is now fastest, the teammate of the man we're riding with, Ayrton Senna, and the time has come down for the fastest man to 1 minute 19.1, which is 5 seconds slower than Ayrton Senna.